A new type of directed energy weapon, part of a family of weapons which operate within the radio frequency segment of the electromagnetic spectrum and are thus referred to as radio frequency weapons. This is a Tesla coil. It was invented some 90 years ago, but now a growing number of experts in the United States feel that it may form the basis of a new generation of Soviet weapons. They are known as radio frequency or RF weapons because they operate in the radio frequency spectrum. Their existence is noted in this U.S. Department of Defense publication. Robert Bass, a physicist and Ph.D. in mathematics, is working on U.S. weapons research. He says that the Soviets seem to be ahead in a number of areas, and especially in RF weapons.
We are behind the Soviet Union in directed energy weapons based on 60 gigahertz microwave beams.
All right, this video is amazing. This is with Amazing Polly. I don't really watch a lot of her stuff, but this is an amazing video. She gets a letter in from this doctor who quotes another doctor and basically says some amazing stuff, revealing stuff about radiation, non-ionizing radiation, radio frequency, RF radiation specifically. They get into one specific example with the Africans in Rwanda where they used EMF frequency to anger each opposing faction, and then they extrapolate that to other sources to say that people are basically being turned into NPCs, which is non-player character, basically computers. I remember, daydreaming in school, and I bet you it's because of the Wi-Fi, because it causes trance-like states. She mentions a Dr. Ross 80. Dr. 80 says that our cells whisper to each other, and that they have frequencies just like EF in radio frequencies, and these other external non-natural frequencies are interfering with our cells' ability to communicate and also holding us back evolution-wise. This is crazy stuff. The person in the letter also touches base on Project Pandora, says it was restarted by the CIA in 2019. Also touches base on the Russian embassy incident back on the American embassy, I think in Russia. They were being attacked by EMF waves. That's huge. That's a very eye-opening rabbit hole to go down. Everybody says that Russia's really far ahead of us with RF weapon-wise. You can knock planes out of the sky. Obviously, you can hurt humans with it. Russians created something called LIDA. We get into that in detail into here. And just think about the algorithms and programs they can create of like voices or like sayings to just aim at somebody and just have over and over and over, or different hallucinations they can cause. This is crazy stuff. I beefed this up. This is heavy. This is a really good watch. Make sure you share this. And at the end of this, I'm going to break down RFs like I've done in previous videos, and then we'll call it a day. This could be the reason for the MK Ultra school shootings. As crazy as it is, this is borderline nuts, but it's absolutely compelling, true information. We got CNN from back in the day doing investigations on this. It's almost like they used to do their job or something. He even says that EMFs can prevent communication. They even mention heated blankets actually causing abortions in women. Let's get into it.
Hey, today I want to read a letter that I received from a biomedical scientist with excellent credentials about the effect of EMFs and radio frequencies on the human body. But not just 5G, all kinds of wireless communication has terrible detrimental effects on the bodies of humans and effects on plants and animals too. First, he attaches Ross 80's obituary in The Lancet and a quote from that. Ross 80 was a leading and controversial figure on the effects of electromagnetic fields, born on January 31st, 1922 in Adelaide, Australia. He died on May 20th, 2004 in Redlands, California, USA, of pneumonia. 80 is probably the most famous for discovering what has been called the 80 window, according to Paul Rash, president of the American Institute of Stress and a clinical professor of medicine and psychiatry at New York Medical College, Valhalla. The 80 window describes the confined parameters under which a very weak electromagnetic signal has a physiological effect, Rash told The Lancet.
Imagine the implications of a weapon with no visible trace. A weapon that could knock out tanks, ships, and planes as fast as the speed of light. The same technology with modifications could disorient and even tranquilize military personnel, rendering them virtually helpless in the battle zone. These are the new weapons of war we will examine in this series. For the past 40 years, the world has been riveted by the threat of nuclear war, and more recently by the prospect of space defenses using lasers and other modern technologies. But while both sides at the Geneva summit will be focusing on these matters, progress is being made in even newer weapons that could render any arms agreement relatively useless. Lightning is the most dramatic form of energy to be found in nature. Scientists have succeeded in creating limited types of artificial lightning, and some think that these could be the forerunners of a new type of directed energy weapon, part of a family of weapons which operate within the radio frequency segment of the electromagnetic spectrum, and are thus referred to as radio frequency weapons. Dr. James Frazier has researched electromagnetic effects for the Air Force for over 10 years, and he, like a small but growing number of weapons experts, feels that radio frequency, or RF weapons, could be the wild card in the ongoing arms race.
You could have tremendous amounts of radiative power. And what you did with that power then is a matter of engineering design and what your goal is.
Robert Bass, a physicist and PhD in mathematics, is working on U.S. weapons research. He says that the Soviets seem to be ahead in a number of areas, and especially in RF weapons.
We are behind the Soviet Union in directed energy weapons based on 60 gigahertz microwave beams.
Dr. Bass and others feel a most likely form of Soviet RF weaponry would be high-powered microwaves, similar to a focused, ultra-high-intensity radar beam. It would literally cook humans and knock out computers and electronic surveillance and communications gear. An operational RF weapon, relatively cheap and reusable, could devastate sophisticated and expensive war machinery. The $20 million F-16 fighter, for example, is totally controlled through electronic sensors and computers. With no manual flight controls, the plane would literally fall out of the sky after being hit with a high-intensity pulse of microwave radiation. Scientists say that microwaves and other types of RF pulses operating at specific frequencies or windows can be transmitted with little or no loss of power. Machines known as gyrotrons can produce the massive pulses needed to drive these devices, and it's believed that the Soviet Union has a 3 to 5 year lead in this technology. Over the past year, CNN has repeatedly asked the Department of Defense and the Air Force about radio frequency weapons. After much resistance, DoD finally said that the subject was too sensitive to discuss. In my next report, unexplained cloud-like phenomena which may be evidence of a Soviet breakthrough in RF technology. Chuck DeCaro, CNN Special Assignments.
Robert Fitzsimmons was a drinking friend and colleague of mine working under 80, and in the mid-1980s, Robert showed that these tiny fields induced a few centimeters away from the dish change important messenger molecules such as cyclic amp or C-amp and calcium ion fluxes is like a switch in the cell that turns its processes and activities such as reproduction on or off, and as such can alter cell activity. This is a direct effect on this, the most important and well-known of intracellular messenger molecules. The implications were dire even then, for which AD received much criticism to silence him. AD also believed that cells talk to one another, intercellular communication, by changing these tiny EMFs, a process of intercellular communication that he charmingly called cell whispering. These findings have implications for human evolution, as we as a species have evolved in the Earth's own low power EMFs, and only recently have bathed ourselves in an ocean of high power frequencies with unknown long-term consequences for mankind. Every wire that carries electricity in every house emits an EMF, and we are surrounded and hence bathed in high power EMFs daily. AD told me that he was very concerned about mobile cell phones that were coming into common usage then in the 1980s and their effects on the brain because of the large EMF fields emitted by the phones held close to the head and especially of young developing brains. He also told me in 1984 that he had been tasked by the U.S. government, presumably by the State Department and CIA, in the 1960s or early 1970s to investigate why workers at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow were coming down with all kinds of strange ailments, lethargy, tumors, problems, concentrating, etc. He discovered that the KGB were bombarding the U.S. Embassy with EMFs to spy on them via EMF carrier waves. I note similarities with the recent descriptions of Havana syndrome. The technology has moved on so much since those days. Now more refined tech is being used to achieve this spying goal. AD hinted at other top-secret work using EMFs that he was worried about. This involved both the U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy, I believe, the CIA Pandora project for remote brain manipulation, which was resurrected by the CIA in 2019. Did not know that.
March 16th, 2018. The U.S. government's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, commonly known as DARPA, announces a bold initiative to develop what they call next-generation non-surgical neurotechnology. It is designed to allow the human brain to directly interface with machines.
We know that DARPA is exploring human-machine interfaces that include direct connections between the brain and outside systems. That's been from the beginning of DARPA's information technology mission, and it continues to this day. DARPA has created some of the most influential technologies of all time, things that we use and take for granted every day, including the project that became the internet. They've created self-driving cars, stealth technology, GPS that fits in your pocket. That's DARPA's specialty, to imagine the future and create it.
Mind-machine interfaces will have many applications in both civilian and military life. But there are those who believe that this same technology could also be used by DARPA as a new form of mind control. Like their counterparts at the CIA, DARPA-funded researchers have spent decades investigating how the human mind can be altered. In 1965, DARPA launched Project Pandora, which studied the possibility of using microwave radiation to control human behavior. The project reportedly ended in 1969, but DARPA's investigation of how machines can affect and possibly control the brain continues to this day.
There are explicit programs of DARPA to read and write to human brains, whether it's through direct implants within the brain.
We can send instructions and information to an actual person from a distance with this kind of technology to let another person control their actions. But that could be something that could be malicious.
That would fall into this realm of mind control and direct human-machine interface that DARPA may well want to keep secret.
A more permanent kind of mind control technology is looming, and it involves modifying the human brain by altering the human body's DNA.
The future of mind control, and the future being right now because these experiments are being done, is using gene editing tools. And one of them would be CRISPR. The way it works is take the CRISPR, which are these short alternating repeats of DNA. You put that together with an enzyme called Cas. And so you take the CRISPR that you want to use, and you put these pieces together that can be injected and insert this DNA to certain areas of the brain so that we can change brain cells and turn you into something you wouldn't otherwise be. So in this way, gene editing technologies like CRISPR really form a definite basis for future mind control.
So they reactivated that project in 2019, and police civilian denial of space EMF weapons potentially to be used for crowd control. I note the Navy and Air Force both have been developing EMF weapons, and I do wonder about the destruction of cars and buildings on 9/11, whether EMF weapons were used there. An unidentified large white 4-engine jumbo jet-sized plane is recorded circling the Twin Towers. Oh. Compare with your story from Rwanda. Yes, right. Do you remember the allegation is that there was a mission to activate the Hutus and the Tutsis into like blind rage so that they would hack each other to death and do a fast-acting genocide. And according to one writer, I forget his name, whose reputation is sketchy, I came to find out, but he said that there was a big Herc plane that sent the microwave weapons down to start that process off. That's a rumor, I guess. Also, clouds are formed by cosmic rays, and I see a potential tie-in there with climate control and EMFs. Apparently, there's a book by Svensmark in the 1990s talking about this. 80 worked with the CIA on use of EMFs for mind control. Quote from a book from Phil Coppens. In 1984, Dr. Ross Adey, chief of research at the Pettis Memorial Veterans Hospital in Loma Linda, California, obtained from Soviet colleagues what is known as a mini woodpecker transmitter labeled the LIDA, and apparently developed by Lev Rabachev and his colleagues in Soviet Armenia. The LIDA operated on a frequency of 40 megahertz and bombarded the brain with low-frequency radio waves. It was used experimentally by the Russians as a replacement for tranquilizers and their unwanted side effects. The pulsed radio waves were said to, quote, stimulate the brain's own electromagnetic current and produce a trance-like state.
This is a Soviet LIDA machine. It broadcast by a number of high-powered radio transmitters operating deep in the Soviet Union since July 4th, 1976. Though the official Defense Department explanation of the woodpecker is that it is an over-the-horizon radar designed to track U.S. missile launches, some scientists suspect that the woodpecker is designed to interfere with human brain function.
As far as I'm concerned, the potential that this has for producing a direct psychoactive effect upon the total American population is there, has never been disproven.
Dr. Robert Becker is a pioneer in the field of bioeffects of electromagnetism.
The signal range within which the woodpecker operates is that which has been reported by many investigators to produce a tranquilizing effect upon animals.
We are just incredibly sensitive to these magnetic stimuli.
Dr. Bob Beck, a PhD in nuclear engineering, has done extensive research into electromagnetic effects on humans.
The signal was permeating power grids in the United States. It was being picked up by power lines, re-radiated. It was coming into the homes on the light circuits.
I was surprised after coming here that the influence of electromagnetic fields was almost completely ignored here.
Dr. Larissa Valenskaya was heavily involved in Soviet electromagnetic research before being allowed to emigrate to the United States. She told CNN about Soviet research in electromagnetic effects.
They demonstrated theoretically and also demonstrate experimentally that low frequency, low energy electromagnetic fields also can possess biological efficiency because any field not only carries energy but also carries information.
She stated that the research was carried out on orders from the Soviet government.
Of course, the military were extremely interested in this potential of remote influence.
Is the United States military working in the field of electronic mind control? Officially, the Department of Defense will not comment because the subject area is, quote, too sensitive.
Pacification, crowd control, numbing, zombie, zoning people out, creating NPCs, you might say. And I think we're suffering from a giant upsurge in NPC-type people at the moment. I mean, I'm just seeing posts all over about it, about how people seem to have become exceedingly stupid and dull-witted in the last little while, and in your encounters when you're out in the world, and people are just not making any sense anymore in their interactions. Again, not everybody, but a lot of the time. Research by Dr. Joseph C. Sharp. Dr. Sharp himself was the subject of an experiment in which pulsed microwave audiograms, or the microwave analog of the sound vibrations of spoken words, were delivered to his brain in such a way that he was able to understand the words that were spoken. Military and undercover uses of such a device might include driving a subject crazy with inner voices in order to discredit him, or conveying undetectable instructions to a programmed assassin.
That's remarkable.
But not as remarkable as a real-life experiment where I was the subject of a prototype device designed to project images into the mind without electrodes. The prototype machine, developed from Soviet scientific data, could, according to some scientists, have a profound effect as a weapon of war. Electronic mind control research is not new. A scientific milestone in this area came in the 1960s, when Dr. Jose Delgado demonstrated remote control over a charging bull. By connecting a radio antenna to electrodes inserted into the bull's brain, Delgado proved that the animal's aggressive impulses could be thwarted by electronically manipulating the bull's muscle reflexes.
Do you realize the fantastic possibilities if from the outside we could modify the inside? Could we give messages to the inside? But the beauty is that now we are not using electrodes.
In recent years, Delgado has shown that the behavior of monkeys can be altered using low-power, pulsating magnetic fields. But in these experiments, there were no antenna implants.
Any function in the brain, emotions, intellect, personality, well, could be perhaps modified by this non-invasive technology.
Delgado's research has so far been limited to animals. But in the Soviet Union, a radio frequency, or RF device, has been used for over 30 years to manipulate the moods of mental patients. It's called a LIDA machine. It radiates pulses of radio frequency energy, as well as light, sound, and heat. The pulse rate is in the extremely low frequency range, between 0 and 100 pulses per second. Dr. Ross Adey is the top researcher at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Loma Linda, California. He has been investigating the effects of the LIDA machine.
Now, what do the Soviets use this machine for? Well, they don't use it anymore. We should be very clear that this is a machine which is regarded by them as somewhat obsolete technologically.
This scientist, who did not want his identity revealed, is employed by the U.S. government and has done secret RF weapons research. He believes that tests done with the LIDA and similar machines prove that humans are susceptible to remote alterations of mood and awareness.
Certain kinds of weak electromagnetic signals work exactly like drugs. And so the promise is that anything you can do with drugs, you could do with the right electromagnetic signals. Apparently, there are specific sites involved, specific functions involved. It's a matter of matching up, just like it is with a pill or a drug, to cause and effect. You could have a cause and effect relationship between a magnetic field and a biological function.
CNN enlisted the help of noted physicist Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher and electrical engineer Bill Van Bice to build and test an RF mine interference machine from data found in Soviet scientific literature. The machine itself was inexpensive and easy to construct, using parts from a consumer electronics store. It emits a weak magnetic field, pulsed at extremely low frequency. In the control room, Van Bice varied the waveforms being generated. In another room, I could see waveforms changing shape in my mind.
Parabola just went by.
Parabola just went by.
Later, I asked Van Bice what a weapon using this technology could do.
Induce basically what would be considered hallucinations in people, direct them to do things against their so-called better judgment.
How easy would it be to assemble a weapon from existing off-the-shelf parts?
In 3 weeks, I could put together a weapon that would take care of a whole town.
We showed the results of our test to Dr. Robert Becker, a two-time Nobel nominee for his work in the biological effects of electromagnetism.
This is a very significant experiment because it carries our understanding of how vision is actually performed a step further into the mystery.
He said he thought the machine caused a disturbance in the brain's interpretation of vision, and as such could be used as a weapon.
That kind of a disturbance in the visual system could markedly influence the operations of a fighter pilot, a helicopter pilot, or even a simple an aberration in the visual field as making everyone seeing double, or everyone having their visual field jitter like a poorly adjusted television screen. The effect of that upon the efficiency with which an Army, an Air Force, or a Navy would operate would be catastrophic.
More about RF weapons in my next report. Chuck DeCaro, CNN, Special Assignments.
Yeah, sort of like MKUltra, and a lot of these school shootings, like James Holmes, and if there even was an Adam Lanza. But what about that guy that supposedly killed Joe Cox, the MP, in the UK? They've been talking about programming Manchurian Candidate type people for a really long time, and look, they know how to press buttons, and they have lots of ways of doing it.
But CNN has learned from this government scientist, who did not want to be identified, that a Navy laboratory conducted research into the use of an RF device for counterterrorism and special operations.
It's possible to entrain a certain percentage of a population, apparently, with weak magnetic fields.
The study also showed that RF signals could dissolve certain types of rat brain cells at a distance, causing disorientation and nausea. According to the scientist, even though the program was successful, the government never followed up on it. Dr. James Frazier did electromagnetic research for the U.S. Air Force for many years. At one time, he proposed a battlefield RF weapons system.
You could make an antenna that would be carryable by a helicopter, and that this could be expected to produce a wide variety of symptoms, actually, by humans who happen to be standing in the beam.
According to Dr. Fraser, the Air Force never followed up. At Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, another RF weapons concept is nicknamed the brain bomb. According to the book Star Warriors, the brain bomb would focus a nuclear blast into a huge pulse of low-frequency RF energy that would stun huge numbers of troops. Apparently, it too has not yet been funded. The Department of Defense will not comment about Soviet RF weapons, or if American RF weapons development is going forward. However, experts interviewed by CNN say that the Soviets are apparently ahead and could exploit that lead in a surprise strategic move, a move that could have grave consequences for the United States. From Washington, this is Chuck DeCaro, CNN Special Assignments.
Or make a Rwanda mob go crazy, Polly, or make a mentally destabilized religious nut believe she is hearing instructions to kill from the voice of God. 80 was also against overhead power cables, as the EMFs emitted from them are colossal and associated with increased incidence of tumors, especially leukemia, and especially in children. So was against positioning schools and pylons close together. Indeed, in Sweden, then, it was illegal to have a school within 200 meters of a power line. The fields dissipate with the square root of the distance from the source. 80 also showed that pregnant women sleeping under an electric blanket were several times more likely to abort than those who slept under a non-electric blanket, and this he ascribed to the EMFs from the electric blankets. Whoa, I never thought of that. And when I was younger, I had an electric blanket. I used to really like it in the winter. Yikes. As you can imagine, 80 came under attack from many sides, including the power industry, the phone companies, and others. A good book on EMFs I can recommend is Currents of Death by Paul Broder.
This is a Tesla coil. It was invented some 90 years ago, but now a growing number of experts in the United States feel that it may form the basis of a new generation of Soviet weapons. They are known as radio frequency, or RF weapons, because they operate in the radio frequency spectrum. Their existence is noted in this U.S. Department of Defense publication, which says the Soviets could use them to destroy components of missiles, to interfere with radar and other electronic systems, and even to alter human mind functions. The concept of RF weaponry was predicted at the turn of the century by Nikola Tesla, an American who had emigrated from Yugoslavia. He is best remembered as the man who invented alternating current electricity. In 1899, Tesla built this giant coil which produced 10 million volts of artificial lightning. From it, he theorized the possibility of death rays. This and many other of his ideas about the physics of electricity were ridiculed by the scientific establishment.
Pure science is not a sure thing. You can't predict what's going to work out and what's not going to work out.
Robert Golka, a research scientist, built a replica of the Tesla coil about 80 years later. Golka was trying to produce a phenomenon known as ball lightning. He also used the Tesla coil to conduct testing for the U.S. Air Force.
What I was doing was setting in maybe 5-foot-long models of advanced fighter aircraft, and we would want to try to find out which part of the airplane was more vulnerable to lightning strikes, whether it was a wingtip or the canard where the pilot sat.
These experiments could also demonstrate the effect of the electromagnetic pulse of a nuclear blast, and Golka says the effect of RF weapons as well. Golka thinks that Tesla's theory that electromagnetic power could be transmitted through the Earth and its atmosphere without wires is a key element in the Soviet Union's work on RF weapons. Tesla's novel weapons theories were generally ignored in the United States. Nikola Tesla died in 1943, and after the Second World War, all his papers and effects were shipped to his native Yugoslavia, where they were enshrined in a museum. Some say that that museum proved to be a gold mine for Soviet weapons scientists.
Interestingly, 80 was facing criticism from Dr. Richard Worrell, an oncologist from New York, who, with no EMF experience, defended the power companies against 80 for a fat fee. Modern medical education and pressures on medical careers causes much fraud to exist in papers published.
We haven't even formally, so far as I know, to ourselves admitted that these weapons exist in the hands of the Soviet Union.
Weapons analyst Tom Bearden, a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel, is among a small group of scientists and engineers who believe that the Soviets have perfected Tesla's ideas and are developing radio frequency weapons on a scale unimagined in this country.
There have been a series of tests of these kinds of weapons, apparently, for a number of years. For example, airliners from Iran, before the fall of the Shah, saw deep within the Soviet Union very large, glowing spherical balls of light, which started out small and then expanded to very large size, which are apparently these kinds of weapons for use in an anti-ballistic missile defense role.
Bearden believes that these satellite photographs are of mysterious non-nuclear explosions near an uninhabited island in the East Siberian Sea, and that they are discharges from an RF weapon that uses intersecting energy beams called scalars.
In doing so, you can create, for example, either an electromagnetic explosion at a distance, or you can create an electromagnetic implosion at a distance, the extraction of energy from a distant point. This would look like a cold explosion, so to speak. And I believe the thing on April the 9th, 1984, off the coast of Japan, that involved several 747 jet airliners, I believe that incident was a test of a cold explosion weapons. At least it met all the characteristics.
Pilot Doug Happ was in one of the 5 airline crews that saw an incredibly large cloud rising from the moonlit overcast below.
It looked like a plate coming up through an overcast, but it just kept expanding, and as it got higher, it was apparent that you could see right through the middle of it, so it looked like a big smoke ring. At the time that we first noticed this cloud, we weren't sure what to do, and we took no evasive action because we didn't know which way to go.
Light bar lighting up, whatever the fuck that is in our sky and all around us right now. It is not
breathing that in.
Has anyone seen that? That is out there tonight around southeast Queensland. Light up the fucking area around you. Look at it, and it's not hitting the ground, it's floating. We first noticed it when we started driving into town and noticed floating fog that wasn't hitting the ground. And now we've just really taken a closer look. Look at the particles, look at it, billions. I swear it looks like some of them are fucking moving independently.
Yeah.
They are, see
They
it?
are.
Like little lights?
Little lights coming down.
Yes,
Can you see
yes,
them?
they're electrically charged.
Yes, they are.
Holy fuck. I don't know if you can see it, but they're electrically charged. You can see them coming down. Holy fuck.
And I think eventually we either ran through it or it completely engulfed us.
Happ says when his flight reached Anchorage, Alaska, it was checked for radioactive contamination. None was found. Dr. James Frazier has done extensive research in electromagnetic effects for the U.S. Air Force.
The people who cited those are experienced pilots and should have been familiar with that kind of event, and this apparently was something outside their experience.
There have been a number of times when Soviet technological surprise has upset the strategic balance. In 1948, the Soviets detonated an A-bomb years before it was thought possible. In 1957, the Soviets stunned the world by launching Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite. And in 1976, the Soviets were discovered to have been embarked upon a program to build particle beam weapons, a discovery which led, 5 years later, to America's Star Wars program. In each case, the United States was able to regain the balance. But this time, with radio frequency weapons, some scientists feel that the Soviet lead may be permanent. In my next report, how radio frequency devices can be used as weapons against the human mind. Chuck DeCaro, CNN, on special assignment.
EMF and RF, what are they? It can be confusing. Let me break it down real quick. The term electromagnetic field, EMF, actually comprises quite different frequency ranges that differ considerably both with regard to physical and biological aspects. And there's different kinds of EMF. There is SMF, which is static magnetic frequency. There is SEF, which is static electric fields. There is extremely low frequency, ELF. There's intermediate frequency, IF. There is electric frequency, and that's EF. And then there's MF, which is magnetic frequency. RF is radio frequency. So interestingly enough, in the ELF range, extremely low frequency range, if strong enough, EF, electrical frequency, and magnetic frequency, MF, are able to stimulate nerve and muscle cells, while in the RF range, energy absorption is heating and is responsible for potential bioeffects, which is what I want to go over real quick here. So basically, to sum it up, within the EMF zone, there are all these different types of frequencies. The RF frequency is the one that is causing the heating damage, which actually burns the glucose out of your brain and causes so many other bad things because it's literally heating you. So basically, elevated EMF fields are often caused from wiring problems or bad grounding. Radio frequency or high frequency electromagnetic radiation is due to wireless equipment and devices for data transmission. So just to get into details, RF radiation is a form of electromagnetic energy with frequencies that range from a few kilohertz up into the gigahertz range. There are many sources of RF energy in the environment. The well-known RF heating effect has led to the development of microwave ovens in the home and use of microwaves for other heating applications. Now real quick, if you look below at the graph, you'll see non-ionizing radiation with ionizing radiation, being nuclear bombs, X-rays, and ultraviolet light. Now let me just tell you how this works. So 1 hertz is 1 pulse per 1 second. And then if you move up to 1,000 hertz, 1,000 hertz is 1,000 pulses per second. Now, as you all know, we're made out of small vibrations of frequency waves. We all know this. So the reason why nuclear bombs radiation is so destructive is because the frequency, the amount that it's pulsating back and forth is so destructive that you see basically destruction right away. Now, they claim that non-ionizing radiation, which is 5G, soon to be 6G, 4G, 3G, 2G, your cell phone, your Wi-Fi, your microwave, they claim that non-ionizing radiation doesn't hurt you at all. Now, anything that's not nature, okay, which is these pulses of energy are not nature at all. It's destroying our equilibrium, it's destroying our balance. Number one, there's this whole PDF right here is probably over 20 studies of proof of these scientists proving that non-ionizing radiation is absolutely dangerous. I'm going to get into that in a second. But I'm just saying, look at this graph. You're going to tell me that the damage just stops after ultraviolet light. That there's no way. And the second thing I want you to look at is the 5G spectrum right there. It's 3.4 to 3.8 gigahertz. Now, if you look to your right, you'll see possible future 5G airwaves, 26, 40, up to 66 gigahertz. So this is from a military PDF, and that's how they mislead you. They say, oh, hey, 5G's here, but potential future 5G waves are here. And that absolutely is weaponizing radiation. You will feel that directly on your skin. Now, the way it works is the lower frequencies on this scale affect you internally. And the higher you go up, the more it affects you externally. Monkeypox. Now, this paper you're looking at that I put together, it looks intimidating. It's about 33 pages, but I promise you it's mostly graphs, and it's a 15 to 20 minute read, and it will change your life, absolutely change your life. This is 20 peer-reviewed studies. I'm summing them up, sometimes quoting them. It's a real quick read, gets to the point. Let me just give you the highlights of these studies and the damages. So first of all, free radicals. What the hell are those? We've always heard of this. I've never known what it is until I got into this research. Now I understand. A free radical is a clump of cells or a clump of atoms that are inside your body, okay? That's a free radical. Now, what is cancer? Cancer is a clump of cells, okay? So free radicals are very, very closely related to cancer, if not cancer. So, moving on to ROS free radical, that's reactive oxygen species free radical. That's a free radical that's created by this RF radiation. This specific set of free radicals actually eats the oxygen out of your blood. You literally can suffocate and drop dead if you have too many of these accumulating in your body. And another curious study is 5G and induction of coronavirus in skin cells. Absolutely amazing study, and that goes right to this and tells you 5G absolutely is RF radiation. All of this is RF radiation. Their first radio transmission, that's when all this began. Breaking it down. How can you hear voices or have different mental conditions from this? When we think, we have neurons that are traveling through neurotransmitters. That's how the messages are sent through our brain, okay? And those are on calcium channels. When the RF hits us, the calcium channels have to react to block back that RF. And each time the RF hits it, the calcium channel blocks it. So what this is it's making the calcium channels overactive, which are giving too many neurons, sending too many messages. This can cause multiple different things. Brain fog, it can cause you to hear voices, schizophrenia, dementia, and more. So much more. Read the studies and it'll elaborate. And back to elaborate more on the ROS free radicals. In that specific experiment, in the study that they did, they realized that a pre-treatment of melatonin completely negated the effects, which means every time you go to sleep and your pineal gland secretes that melatonin, that's a powerful antioxidant, and that literally reverses what free radicals do, which includes ROS free radicals. So that's why we need these antioxidants. And what are good antioxidants? Okay, coconut oil is a great antioxidant. You can Google antioxidants. There's so many antioxidants out there. CBD is such a good antioxidant that the government actually has a patent for antioxidants derived from CBD. You can look that up. I provide a amazing CBD that you cannot beat, that is absolutely changing lives, that I've used every single day, that my dogs use. It's amazing stuff. You want to check that out, link below. You really need to read this PDF for yourself, but I want to touch base on a few more things. Microwave syndrome is a term that the scientists have coined for hypersensitivity that you develop when you have too much of this going on. It literally causes you out of nowhere to have headaches, nausea. You'll just be hit with something. And you know, they even say if you go up to the ionizing radiation all the way up, you get flu-like symptoms, which means you absolutely get flu-like symptoms further down the line. That's what all these studies are proving and confirming.
Range of symptoms. The symptoms of acute radiation sickness would be just exactly like a terrible flu. A person would have a headache. They would feel very tired. They would have a little bit of a fever. They might have some vomiting at higher doses. All of this would be more severe and would come on more rapidly.
The biggest thing about all this radiation is it causes inflammation. And if you know anything about the medical world, inflammation is the #1 cause of disease. So interesting, this stuff that's been around since 1917, the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, this radiation that's been around since then that causes inflammation, it's been causing all of the disease that's around. It's exacerbating everything, all the chemicals in the food, the chemtrails in the sky, everything, all of the preservatives, all of the bad stuff, the tap water, all the chemicals in it, it's exacerbating it. And that's absolutely our issue that we have today. Okay, it's bad for you. You get it. I get it. We get it. How do we help ourselves? How do we stop this? Multiple things. The biggest and most important thing is shielding. There are studies that prove and that show that different metallic fabrics and different metals can absolutely provide an amazing shielding, okay? And you've learned in the video earlier that that doctor was wearing a silver-lined hat. We absolutely have those hats as well. They're on back order, but those hats absolutely work. You could just buy the material and make your own hat. The other thing you can do is buy the material, put it over your Wi-Fi router. If you're close to your Wi-Fi router, it won't cut down on the signal at all, but if you're farther away, it will cut down on the signal. But it'll basically completely stop the RF damaging waves from hurting you. The other thing you can do is get a big piece of that fabric, whatever fabric you choose, whether it's through us or anybody else. Ours guarantees works and you won't be wasting any of your time or money, so I always suggest you go through us. But if you buy a big blanket size piece of fabric and you incorporate it into a blanket or even just cover up with it, it'll allow your body to produce that melatonin at night without disruption from the EMF constantly. Our phones are always hitting you. Never sleep near your phones. Never sleep near your Wi-Fi. Shut it off at night if you can. Let your body recoup. Let your body recover. I sleep underneath a $2,500 silver canopy that my buddy gave me when I was having microwave sickness. And it was literally a godsend to have him come give me that. I've never given a friend a hug like I hugged him. It literally saved my life and got me into what I'm doing right now. So please, the most important thing you can do is read this PDF and make somebody else read it, because once you read it, then you know. You can go to the studies and check it for yourself. The other thing, go to vtvault.org/danger. Those are all my milestone videos that woke me up to this before all of this. I've known about it for a while. I thought it was kooky until I experienced it myself. Then it dove me into speaking out about it and getting products out to save the world. That's where I'm at with it. You go to vtvault.org/quantame, you got your shielding. vtvault.org/CBD, you have your antioxidant. The most powerful antioxidant will remove anxiety, help you sleep, help with inflammation. Marijuana plant, it's like not even from this planet. It's like an alien plant. I find it so interesting, so intriguing, and I just can't believe that there's so many medicinal effects for that. And not only is there CBD in this spectrum, there's everything besides THC. So you got CBG, THV, you look them up. They're everywhere. And inside of our CBD, we actually add the root, which has a whole nother set of amazing medicinal compounds, probably super antioxidants. We haven't even looked it up. We don't have time doing so many things like this. So if you want to support this information being out, if you want to save yourself and your family, check out my studies, check out my site. You can also follow me on Telegram at t.me/rfshielding and follow my experiments as I try different stones and different materials and see if we can find even better blocking materials. If they're not going to come out with these studies, then I'll come out with them, okay? I'm not a scientist, but I'm going to get to the bottom of this and record my endeavors, and I hope you follow me, and I hope you like what you see, and I hope we can learn together and save this planet. All love, and I'm here until I die. Love you guys.